Hello, thank you for listening to SpookBox, the only horror movie themed podcast currently demarcating the passage of time. My name's Daff, and as always, I'm joined by Heather to my left.
Hello, everyone.
And on my right, Connor.
Hi.
Today's film, we're doing something a little bit different. We're not going to necessarily be talking about a film that could be classified as a horror film. We are going to talk about... Controversial, and I guess we'll get into that. We're going to be talking about the 2019 film directed by Tyler Cornack called Butt Boy. And before I jump into a summary, I just love to get some first impressions from you guys. What did we think of Butt Boy?
Well, the alliteration isn't lost on me. You know, they're trying to get me to giggle right from the word go, but I did not giggle. I did not giggle one bit.
They're trying to get you to giggle from the word butt.
From the word butt.
Or the word boy.
And I am someone that finds butts really funny.
Yeah.
But this film...
You're the target demo.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also someone that's easily grossed out, and this film grossed me out, and its kind of flair wasn't something that appealed to me either.
This week is going to be an hour of us just fighting venomously
I think we're gonna
about this fucking movie.
We're going to be duking out over this film. We've already talked about it a little bit, duking out. Get
It's so over it. It reminds me of those Instagram accounts where people like take photos exclusively of dead pigeons in takeaway boxes and are like, oh, this is reality. It's not reality. It's one perspective on reality.
I completely disagree. It's got such a fantasy element to it. It's got
postmodern energy
Wait a minute.
that depresses me.
Did you just compare this film to basically gross out Instagram?
Gross out Instagrams and like cursed image Instagrams. And they just make me sad. Like, I'm looking for real emotion, like real energy. It's 2020. Being over it isn't helpful to anyone. And like, I just need sincere emotion. And I don't think this film produces it once.
All right, well, I don't mean you to sort of get right into it right away.
It's okay, calm me down.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Well, so Connor, we've got an impression of what you thought of the film. You've got a lot to say about this film.
I don't know.
Probably as much as Heather, probably.
Yeah, okay. I probably have as much to say as Heather does. I don't know. My reaction to this movie is maybe equally complicated, but whereas Heather comes down on the side of like, yeah, complicated and it sucks, I think it's like, yeah, this is a complicated little movie, but I really respect that a small team was able to come up with something that looks and feels as unique as it does.
Yeah, and I think the budget, I think I read somewhere the budget was about $150,000.
Okay.
Which is nothing.
Oh my God, I think it's so creative. And I think at times it's really pretty. But it leaves me feeling really empty and aghast.
Like when the butt is sucking up like the entire car. That's the pretty part.
It feels like I'm babysitting like a 7-year-old boy, like, and you know that gets tiring pretty quickly. I just want something beautiful or emotional to enter the scene.
So similarly for me, right? So I watched it. I think you guys watched it maybe once, right? And I think Heather, you told me that watching it a second time would detract from your ability to talk about it.
I think so. Like, I think that what it does do is introduce a lot of discussion points, like maybe the most we've ever had yet. So I want to like branch out from the film and what it inspires rather than like really go in on it, because like I'm trying to be fair to the fact that I'm not the target audience. I didn't find it funny, but it doesn't mean that there isn't a lot to talk about here. And yeah, so
well, see, that was what happened with me watching this. So I did watch the film a second time and trying to get a summary together, and I did sort of get lost in, you know, the initial thoughts that I had about the film were somewhat muddied by a second viewing, I think.
In what way?
I guess I was happy enough coming away from the film the first time with my reading, with my somewhat queer reading of the film. And I think I went back into it again, trying to find it again, and sort of came up a little short.
Yeah, I think we were all like forcing that. Like we wanted that to be the case.
Yeah.
But I think it's more like a late capitalist critique. Like he's catatonic because of the way his life has been set up by the system at large. And his deviance is the only way to feel like a sort of shock of pleasure. But I don't know if it's necessarily got like an overt queerness to the way that he's resisting.
Sure.
Well, it has everything. It has overt queerness. It has psychoanalytic
it feels very het male.
Realism.
It feels very het male to me, the way that he's resisting.
It is het male, but the thing about it is that it explores how heterosexual male sexuality is actually itself a homosexual paradigm, and I have Julia Kristeva to back me up on this one, so it's gonna be awesome.
Okay, well, before we get right into it, I'm going to read off a summary, and to be honest, I'm a bit hesitant to read off the summary, because if you're listening to this and you haven't seen it, I do recommend that you just go watch it without knowing much of anything about it, because that's the way I watched it, and I think that was really beneficial. But into the summary. So, Butt Boy, 2019. Married father of one, Chip Gutschall is an IT engineer at the office of RTM, Rooftop Makeover, whatever that is. He's bored, numb, and alienated from the everyday events of his life. A prostate exam from an overzealous doctor awakens desire in Chip, and later during passionless sex with his emotionally distant wife, Anne, he attempts to have her draw special attention to his anus. She refuses. Afterwards, when Chip is alone in the shower, he stares longingly at a bar of soap before inserting it into his anus in a fit of orgasmic pleasure. What follows over the next few days is a sequence of increasingly large objects being inserted into Chip's improbably spacious anus. A TV remote, a scrubbing brush, their family dog Rocky, and, most incriminating of all, a newborn baby. Later, cops show up at the Gutschall home asking for information about the missing baby, but Chip feigns ignorance and avoids arrest. Later, fraught with guilt at the escalated consequences of his compulsion, Chip attempts to hang himself in his garden shed. 9 years later, Detective Russell Fox drives to his AA meeting, whereupon he's linked up with a sponsor, one of the AA's veteran attendees, Chip Gutschall, still alive from a failed suicide attempt 9 years prior. Chip and Russell get to know each other at a diner, where we learn that Russell is a hot sauce fanatic. As Russell begins to reminisce about his days of heavy drinking, Chip begins to think about his own, now reformed compulsion, namely putting things up his anus. Chip returns home, and once his wife Anne and son Marty are asleep, relapses. He inserts a board game piece into his anus, and later a trainer, a vase, and a spatula. Russell is put on the case of a missing child, Andrew Lee, who goes missing on a bring-your-own-child-to-work day at RTM, the office where Chip works. Over the course of an intense police interview between the two men, it becomes clear to the audience that Chip inserted Andrew into his anus and stole the floppy disks containing incriminating CCTV evidence, which he later hides in the cupboard under his bathroom sink. Chip becomes Russell's prime suspect, and his suspicions are piqued further when he finds a hair attached to a chunk of fecal viscera underneath Chip's desk. A clue. Russell's suspicions are confirmed after tailing Chip, and he reports to his senior Chief Lazara. The dialogue is as follows, and I'm just going to read it from the film. Chief Lazara asks Detective Fox, "So you're asking me to go off this theory you got about a white married male who happens to be a father, living in the suburbs of Critica County, who also happens to be your AA sponsor, which I might add has been secretly running around cramming objects, animals, and children up his asshole. Then he somehow digests them, and he does this in sprees almost in a serial killer fashion. Is that about it?" Chief Lazarus does not believe him. At the behest of Anne, Chip invites Russell to dinner. The dinner is contentious. Chip looks uncomfortable, and Russell goads him in a passive-aggressive way. Before leaving, Russell uses the bathroom and finds the missing floppy disk in the cupboard under Chip's bathroom sink. Driving away, Russell is followed by Chip, and the two face off near a power plant. A scuffle ensues, ending with Chip attempting to sucker Russell into his anus. Russell escapes with the floppy disk, but his superior still doesn't believe his theory. The two face off again at a child's birthday party in the darkness of a laser tag arena. Russell brings a gun and attempts to kill Chip, shooting him in the leg, but Chip successfully manages to suck Russell into his anus. A sputtering Russell comes to inside his anal tract, where he finds the missing child Andrew, Rocky the dog, and an assortment of items, and a young boy who is revealed to be, plot twist, Russell's long-lost son, kidnapped by Chip at the beginning of the movie, as you might remember. A month later, Chip, hailed as a hero for stopping a so-called terrorist attack at the laser tag place, is recovering from his gunshot wounds. Russell and co., surviving inside Chip's anal tract, literally eating shit, discover the anal passage through which they entered. Gradually, they begin passing things back through Chip's anus, the soap, the remote control, Rocky the dog, Panicked and horrified, Chip drinks strong stomach elixir to dissolve the remaining contents of his colon. Russell is spurred into action just as Chip begins giving a speech. Russell, a hot sauce fanatic, as we might well remember, starts dousing Chip's anal tract with hot sauce before setting it alight with a fuse, causing Chip to explode. Andrew Russell and his son emerge unscathed. The end.
Incredible. I mean, just listening back to the movie, it's so
There's a lot of stuff from that summary that I cut as well, because there's a whole subplot. Well, I don't even know whether to call it a subplot. It just didn't really seem to fit in with my summary, with Detective Fox being sort of quietly obsessed with his ex-wife and her new husband.
Oh, yeah.
Because there are a lot of scenes of interspersed, a lot of scenes are sort of there of him spying on them, turning up to their house drunk, that kind of thing. And it's not exactly clear why that happens in the film until the very end, and we find out that the child who disappeared at the beginning of the movie was his child. I
think that plays into something that I know you want to talk about, Heather, about sincerity and about, real emotionality. And I think that the film does try, in spite of this like magic realist body horror context, to try and give these characters real emotions through things like that subplot. Mm-hmm. And I think the performance from the detective
Fox, yeah,
I think his performance really just solidifies that this is something that at the very least the actor is taking seriously. And maybe the director and writer of the movie is taking pleasure in this sincere performance, in that kind of Dr. Strangelove, Slim Pickens, mm-hmm. serious actor in a comedy kind of thing. Maybe he's laughing at the sincerity of this actor, but I think his performance is so sincere that there is something to hold on to. I don't know, for me.
But then you compare him to the boss character, who's like so manic that I feel like the balance is off and it's overwhelmingly more like a parodic film. But even though there are small moments of, you could read sincerity, but the logical conclusion of that sincerity is that his son went missing and his life was effed up in this way because of someone else's taboo desire. So is the critique of desire, like of things that don't fit in, like, what are we to take from that sincerity and the emotional notes of it?
I didn't think about that, actually.
Because that's ultimately what has led to that sincerity, is the fact that someone else's actions towards their taboo desire created that.
Yeah,
so
I've been thinking so much about like what the film just like does in its own runtime. I haven't been thinking anything about like what kind of conclusions it might have.
Well, I'm trying to think about that, because if we're to see the character of the detective as kind of like triumphant in the end, like his son has returned to him, that kind of spells the end of like Chip's exploration. So you could read the conclusion that we have to just kind of quarantine off our desires for the happiness of everyone. I know.
Oh no!
Word of the day.
We need to ring a bell.
Word of the season.
Word of the season. I'm just trying to be topical all the time. I'm trying my hardest. Thanks for acknowledging
that's interesting though. But I don't necessarily think that that's the conclusion that we are necessarily supposed to get from this film. That desires ought to be quarantined. It's that desires are just quarantined, right? There's no ought to be about it. It's just like, I don't see...
You don't see it making the case for that to happen.
No, definitely not.
Okay. Yeah. No, I'm just confused about what the conclusion is. Like,
I am too, now that you've said it, like, if the film is trying to make any kind of argument in itself, if it has a hypothesis, then I would like the film less. But if it's just like a series of motivations, if it is a catalyst to try and spur on like interesting thoughts or queer readings or those kinds of things, then I think it's a really cool, useful movie.
Well, if we can't get any conclusion about human nature or desire or like any kind of truth from it, then I think it's a postmodern film. It's just like a grab bag of loads of like stances and emotions and experiences and parody. And for me,
you're done.
I'm done.
You're so postmodern that you're over postmodern.
I think I am. I've like really taken to metamodernism, and like I never really resonated with like all of the irony. So
I think I have. And then if I actually analyze myself, I'm still just like a Rick and Morty fan. Like,
this is the most Rick and Morty movie ever.
Screaming Pickle Rick, thinking that there's some sincerity.
Oh my god, there's going to be Butt Boy t-shirts. Like, for sure. Yeah.
With any luck, yeah.
There's going to be a Butt Boy t-shirt under my Christmas tree.
Yeah, I know it's gay for Christmas.
get Podcart. What are they called? Podcart on the phone. Podswag. We'll get them on the phone. So yeah, I am interested in this idea of whether this is a postmodern movie or whether this is a metamodernist movie. Metamodern movie. Modernist?
Metamodern?
Who knows?
I have some definitions for the children.
That would be great, actually.
If anyone's listening that
really
needs a quick recap. We know you know them, babe. We know.
Just in case.
I too know them, but I would also like to hear you say.
Right, Daff?
Yeah.
I know. I could say this.
So let's set the scene before we dive into this part of the debate.
Nice.
So postmodernism is an intellectual stance characterised by irony, eclecticism and self-consciousness because stable identity, hierarchy and categorisation have been proven to be slippery and contingent. Dragged into the undertow goes morality, truth, human nature, reason, science, language and social progress because they're all now proven to be lame. That is my reading of postmodernism.
Just that they're lame.
They're lame. lame modernist stuff. We're over that. Metamodernism has been kicking around as a tentative new attitude since the 50s. A guy called Turner heralded the turning point in 2011, calling for an end to the inertia resulting from a century of modernist ideological naivety and the cynical insincerity of its bastard child. It's a mercurial possession by nature that instead moves between irony and sincerity, naivety and knowingness, relativism and truth, optimism and doubt, etc., in pursuit of new and elusive horizons. It's like, we get everything is relative now, but can we call an Uber because it's making me sad to not have emotions? So does Butt Boy bring back emotions? Is it mercurial? Or is it just fully over everything? This is my concern.
Okay, it's
interesting.
It's the most important question to ask about this movie, I think. So, but that point about sincerity being lame, was that Frederick Jameson?
I think it was Yeah,
that sounds familiar. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, I dived deep into lots of texts for that summary.
You've had quite the week.
Oh yes, definitely. Yeah. So I mean, like, did you guys have an emotional response to this film? Like, this week I watched The Florida Project and Tangerine for the first time, and they were so, like, mercurial in that aspect that metamodernism strives for, that I think that coloured my attitude towards Butt Boy because I feel like it was one note the whole time. But, I mean, maybe it just wasn't a film for me. Did you guys have that kind of emotional response at points?
Okay.
Or like some kind of like reaction that was more than just one note?
Emotional response. Interesting use of words, because I think one thing I did know about watching the film the first time was that I did take its premise seriously. Like I was invested in what would happen to these people. Like, how is Chip going to get away with it if he gets away with it? Is Russell going to finally catch him? How is this going to resolve?
Yeah, the cat and mouse element, there's definitely anxiety because of that.
But I read that as having an emotional response.
Okay, sure.
Right.
So the anxiety of, like, breaking the law.
Breaking the law, like, no. I think I was flitting between the idea that I found, in as improbable a premise as Butt Boy has, I did find some kind of emotional resonance in Chip's desire. Like, I feel like I almost recognize that desire.
So Chip is the Butt Boy.
Chip is the Butt
like
Boy.
His sort of secretive, like, double life.
Yeah, because I feel like to a degree that's a life that, you know, as sort of outlandish as the premise is, it's a life that I also lived at some point or another.
You're going to have to expand on this.
Of just of feeling like you grew up queer, having this kind of desire, a sexual expression that you wanted to express, but felt that you couldn't, or felt that you would sort of...
Hold on a second. Before you make Chip your martyr,
I am not
I have to say that surely there's like a spectrum of feelings in that experience, and one of the feelings would be shame. And the problem I have is that Chip never seems to experience shame. He's just like...
Wait, what are you talking about?
He totally does.
Filled with shame.
Completely. He tries to kill himself at the beginning.
Come on. He tries to kill himself.
He's crying. He tries to kill himself.
He goes to AA to try and suppress or sublimate his desires for like the rest of his life, as far as he knows, and he hides that fact from his wife.
Yes,
it's still played for laughs though. Like it's one note, and I don't feel like we really go in on laughs. We don't really go in on that shame at all though. Like I actually don't think it's explored really. I think it's more plot driven than character driven. I need it to be character driven.
I think that's fine. I
need it to be character driven for the film to have depth. And I think it's purely in aid of the fantastical plot he does those things.
I don't disagree, but I think that there's a difference between like plot driven, character driven, and then like an exercise in theme and world building. And I totally agree with you that, that these characters are bizarre archetypes, and I think that they are archetypes. Like I tried kind of hard to find some kind of like history of previous butt boys, and I think I found a really good one.
Oh my god, I'm like cultural butt boys.
Should I drop that bomb now? I was hoping it would come up kind of naturally.
This was something that I tried to research, but
this is natural. It's all natural.
I mean, okay, so the first thing is, so we've kind of like drifted around the issue, and I hope you don't have a question like scheduled for queerness or anything.
No, not really. I mean,
so I don't know. Look, the first thing I thought about when I watched the movie, it was like, well, okay, maybe this is all exploring anal retentiveness, like in that kind of Freudian psychoanalytical tradition. But then the more I read into that, the less it actually really seemed to fit. Because I don't know if you know this, but you will know, anally retentive people have these particular tendencies as prescribed by Freud, that they are, very fastidious, tightly wound people.
Can I just make a risky side note that Connor and I have a friend, we won't name names, or give any details, but we've suspected for the longest time that they're anally retentive because of the characteristics you're about to describe. But no shame, just so I think it is a thing. Like
the idea is that children, basically, there's some amazing quotations. So he says in his 1908 essay, he says, the anally retentive child is one that will refuse to empty their bowels when they are put on the pot because they derive a subsidiary pleasure from defecating. Okay.
So they don't want to be seen while they're doing it?
No, they love being seen. They don't care if they're seen or not, but it's like they just like pooing, right? They just like stuff in their butt, basically.
Oh, so they don't want the poop to come out because they enjoy something being in their butt.
Yes, cool. Yes, that's exactly it. So they're trying to hold on to this is so disgusting. But anyway,
did you hear how many times I said anus in that summary? I think we're past beyond the pale now.
So kids trying to... Oh God, Freud is so weird and gross. So little kids trying to hold things in their butt, but it is socially unacceptable to be that attached to putting things or keeping things in your butt. So your parents will tell you off and tell you to wipe your butt and clean your butt and all that kind of stuff. So it's the science of butt hygiene then has influenced how these desires manifest themselves, and so then these kids try to sublimate their desires, and that then manifests itself in being tight with money and being very compulsive about cleanliness and stuff like that.
In other words, anal.
This is exactly it. So that's the way.
So they, as a person, become a butthole, in terms of the way they move through the world. The butthole that they identify with buttholes so much that they try sucker things
Yes, exactly.
Towards them and keep them there. Like, they want to live as butthole.
So that's it. So that's what Freud's saying. That it even manifests itself in how people deal with money. For in the course of life, this precious material attracts onto itself the physical interest which was originally proper to feces, the product of the anal zone. So basically people see like money as their shit, and then they want to hold on to all of the money instead of holding on to their feces, right?
Oh my god, but then we do say all the time, like, that's my shit, get your shit together. Do you know what I mean? Like, we talk about our belongings as our shit.
Yeah, maybe. I don't
Gwen
know.
Stefani was right.
Yeah.
Gwen Stefani.
Oh no, Gwen Stefani.
No, wait. Gwen Stefani's shit is bananas,
She is so
actually.
wrong about so much.
Really?
We are not endorsing Gwen Stefani.
I don't think I know this. I don't think I know.
It's a conversation for a different time.
I think Gwen Stefani is the philosopher that coined the term cultural appropriation and then went on to enact it, right? That's Gwen Stefani.
That's
as an art project to educate us all on what cultural appropriation is.
Okay.
Yes.
So
Cool.
Freud, anal retentiveness. But then the more I was looking at it, the more I thought about the movie. In the film, Chip is a total slob. You know?
Yeah, it's true.
He's not keeping a lot together.
He's not neat.
No.
He's not... He sort of seems quite cloistered.
And he seems quite happy for his wife that he doesn't love to spend his money and to have kids and to, do things. Like he seems to dress himself like well, but kind of against his better nature. There's that long scene in the movie where he's wearing the bathrobe and just like putting various things up his ass.
Yeah,
like
the montage scene.
That's not really anally retentive as Freud would describe it, because he's so slovenly about the whole thing. It's
God.
It's actually closer to an orally retentive person, this kind of like pleasure-seeking person that Freud would describe. So it didn't really fit really well. So I wanted to keep exploring and seeing if there were other things. And well, what I found then was this really cool book it's an edited collection of articles from a British sexologist called Havelock Ellis. I don't know if you know about Havelock Ellis. He was kind of like a pre-Kinsey figure.
Okay, yeah.
So he was like kind of much more into sex being a natural and non-sinful act than people were around like the 1890s and early 1900s. He himself is infamously known for being like an urophilic person.
Give us a download on that.
Yeah.
He thought that he was asexual for his like whole life. Mm-hmm. And then I think he was in France and he saw a French woman. I think he was in France, or maybe I've just like supplemented that part of the story.
Such a romantic.
Right?
Yeah.
So he saw this woman pull up her skirts and pee in the middle of a park. Actually, it might have been a man. But he realized that seeing another human being pee was what did it for him.
Right.
And he was like, oh
Man,
my God.
he would love me. I'm peeing all the time.
What?
I pee with the door open. Like, just saying, I'm really glad that I'm someone's kink.
Oh
he should come to my house.
Oh, now do we need an air horn for that, or do we need like?
You should get someone with like
we're gonna have to get
tiny
some kind
bladder
of soundboard going
syndrome.
on.
Like that would be.
I don't know.
You
what
should have
sound
like
to
a
associate
dating
with
app
that.
for people with tiny bladders
You
and
just
people
broke
with that
too
kink.
much information. That like goes beyond too much information. That was like all of the information.
I thought this
ever.
was like the shame episode and like the, you know what I mean? Like I'm just trying to live the theme.
I'm gonna be disappointed that if every other consecutive episode isn't also a shame
I
episode.
reveal a
shame
shameful
bomb.
secrets.
One shame bomb guaranteed per week.
I'm just getting into the theme.
Okay,
Sorry,
so Heather
Connor.
pees
So
with
anyway.
the door open. Awesome. So we have that. But basically, in this cool collection, there was lots of great quotations from him where basically he was talking about, he called it sodomy. He didn't call it like, there were terms like homosexuality at the time, but in Britain at that time, the context, it was much more common to refer to like sodomy as this act. And sodomy was seen as a criminal act, whether or not it was consensual. But like, bear in mind at the time that sodomy was being discussed as a criminal act, and then like the sentences were being reduced, Oscar Wilde, all of that kind of stuff. The age of consent was moved from 12 to 16. So, like, we're talking about a very different, like, sexual context at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
But Ellis wrote about it and was saying, like, you know, it's not a sinful act. Homosexuality is just something that happens. Like, and I've done a big study. He did a study that lasted 5 years and found, like, lots of evidence of homosexuality. But the really cool part is that as Ellis was writing all of this stuff, other people were writing about it at the same time and talking about, like, the homosexual as a person. Like, what were they like? What did they do? Why are they like this? And lots of people started coming up with theories about them having a different psychology or maybe even a different physiology. And Foucault then wrote about this and said that in the 19th century, the sodomite had been a temporary aberration. The homosexual was now a species. So people were, like, theorizing that they had different bodies.
Okay.
That's very cool. How did we get from piss to homosexuality, though? Like, how did Ellis move from I love pee to...
Because he just inspired, like, Foucault and other people, like, later in life. People would, like, draw on Ellis.
But he was, like, writing about, like, piss core, and then other people were like, let's write about homosexuality, like, inspired by his gall.
I don't actually know how much he wrote about the urophilia thing, but he knows.
Sorry, I'm just stuck
was
on that.
Was that just
like,
a little bit of context?
That was just context.
That's just a fun fact.
Oh,
Thank you.
oh my god, sorry. I thought that was, like, the whole
Havelock
theme.
Ellis Golden Showers, and he was, like, a pioneering
Anyway, he was writing about,
homosexuality.
like, taboo sexualities
Exactly.
at that time. Okay, cool.
But the important point was just that idea of, like, different physiologies, and I think that really manifests itself in the film because Chip has this amazing ass cavern.
Yeah.
Like, he has an entire, like,
His
tunnel.
Cave of Wonders.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's like, and I think it's really cool because in America right now, there's still, I think, more tension around ideas of different sexualities. I think America is less okay with homosexuality than other parts of the world because they have less open conversation about it. Maybe, I don't know. It seems that way, that there are other, you know, outside of, like, New York, Seattle, Los Angeles, you know, there's a wide stretch of America that isn't very open to having these kind of sexual
sort of sexual
conversations.
conservatism, right?
Yeah, and so I think there's still these, like, Edwardian or Victorian ideas of, like, what a homosexual could be. Do they have different bodies? Is there something different about them as a species?
Surely, like, Foucault meant, like, a different species, like, socially, in terms of how they're socially interpreted.
But what you're saying is literally, I mean, literally they were
Foucault was
treated.
saying that Foucault didn't give birth to this new species. Foucault is reflecting on
that era and
on
saying
that
that
era.
it dawned the societal view of homosexuals as this, like, different
other
species. This
yeah,
other...
yeah. These,
okay.
like, sexologists in the turn of the century and the fin de siècle. I don't know. I can't speak French.
And obviously, like, Foucault was living as a homosexual, so he
Yes.
was trying to, like, archive, like, the history of
The
his
history of
community.
sexuality.
Yes, okay.
So what you're saying is
But
he's
then
allowed to say that.
Well, no, I'm saying what was his, like, idea of homosexuality at the time that he was writing?
Oh man, I mean, it sort of sucked around his time. Like, he lived through and was a victim of the AIDS crisis. So yeah, it really sucked. But you know, it's interesting just to think about it. But the thing that was then really cool, I thought, was I was looking at all of this stuff and thinking about, like, how bodies of homosexuals have manifested themselves in different ways, and somehow, some way, that led me to something awesome from Japan. And you know when I'm reaching...
We need a sort of sound cue for when Corner talks about Japan.
You know when I'm reaching into my Japan bucket that I've got something really great. So in Japan, there used to be this idea that I think it's only men, but it might be all human beings, have this thing called the shirikoroma.
Okay.
Shirikoroma. And that is basically your butt spirit.
Everyone has a butt spirit.
Everyone has a small, hard ball in their butt where their spirit lives. Oh my God.
I think I've heard of this.
I hope that this isn't something that people still take really seriously. Like, if there's a potential that I'm offending anybody, I'm so sorry. I've
just never heard of this. Like, who who believes in butt spirit? Like, are people taught it in primary school? Like, how far-reaching is this?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I saw it in like a few references to.
But do you think it's to do with like the taboo sexuality situation in Japan?
I really do. You know, because homosexuality in Japan was really prevalent up until the Meiji Restoration. So, like, geisha for the longest time.
So around
were
what time
young
was
boys.
that? The Restoration.
You know, I don't know. I don't even know.
Are we saying like early history, basically?
Honestly, I don't know. No, not that late. I think it was. Oh God, I think the Meiji Restoration is like the 1800s. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
so
Yeah.
dumb.
Sure.
I don't know.
Let's run with that.
But geisha were often young boys, and people had sexual relationships with young boys in that kind of like Greek way. But yeah, so there's this thing of the shirikodama. Okay, so possibly spirits live in our butts. I don't know. But then that led me finally to the point that I wanted to get to of another like butt monster, which is a thing called the shirime. And it is a monster that is like a normal human being, but instead of a face, it has its butt.
Does it have its face on its butt?
It just has like an asshole with a giant eyeball in it.
You know, this is ringing a bell for me.
Is
honestly.
it in Sekiro? I think there's maybe.
Oh no, I don't think it's in Sekiro.
But what I have to say is that you're like, okay, we tried reading Chip through a Western lens, and like Freud didn't really work. We need to look to other cultures to read Chip. I don't know if that's the case. Isn't it just like infantile humor? Like, I don't know if they're saying he's got a monster in his butt.
How dare you? He is a shirime. It is definitely, this film is 100% an intentional.
And he's also my martyr, so watch what you say.
You're trying to elevate it so hard. Like, I don't know. Give me one example from the film where his cavernous butt is actually like a monster with a face.
So what I would say here is that, like, it's almost as if you're not talking about the film at all, because this film seems really singular as a film. You don't really get many films that even acknowledge the existence of the fact that every character in film has an anus.
Right?
So, I mean, I don't know. I think as a way of thinking about it, we could think about it in this really broad way. It's like, what does it mean that this film's premise is to do with a man's anus?
Yeah, maybe we can only read it in a Western way in terms of the fact that it is so singular for us to talk about butts. Comparatively in Japan, there's all these different like cultural ways to like signify the butt and the butt monster. But like, I feel like trying to read it through another lens isn't helpful, like, because like Daff said, this is quite unique in the West, and I think it's trying to be a unique film.
I'm way too excited right now, keyword. Hey, I think I do know what you're saying, but at the same time, I think that it actually kind of is useful, because the thing is, it's not like the shirime, the like butt monster with an eyeball up its butt, is like a good guy. It's still a bad guy. Do you know what I mean? It's still like the scary thing. So basically, the reason I'm like bringing all this stuff up is that I think that we're still kind of weirdly scared of our butts.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
You know, globally, I think we're afraid of butts, and that's why this film has this like disgusting appeal. You know, because it's like
turns out it's still a taboo. Really? Like, right.
Sort of, yeah. You know, or we're getting to the point where a film called Butt Boy could be made.
Yeah.
But it's so strange to think as well that like a film called Butt Boy can be made now, whereas you can have these like folk myths about butt monsters in like the, you know, early 1700s and stuff in different cultures. You know what I mean? So it's like, I don't know. I think it's maybe for me it was interesting to kind of like bring the butt back. Bringing the butt back to the conversation.
No, the butt was maybe never there. What makes you think the butt was ever there? Like,
well, the fact that, you know, I don't have the information in front of me, but I sort of refuse to believe that many cultures all over the world have folklores to do with sort of butts, basically.
You've never heard of Das Buttkringle?
Das Buttkringle. I'm talking specifically about Das Buttkringle. But,
no, I think you're right, Daff, as well. Yeah, I don't think it's a widespread thing.
Oh no, but I believe it's more widespread than we might believe, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. It's not mainstream, but there probably are people saying things about butts,
Yeah.
So the objective of Butt Boy is let's talk about butts. Let's be more open about butts. Does it achieve that, or does it take us a step back?
I think it's a provocation in a way. I mean, whether it wanted to be a provocation or not, it is. Like, I mean, it's like I said, it's true that we just never get. But you could expand it broadly to sort of feeling alienation from our own bodies and the way that they work, and the way they're represented in film, right? Mm-hmm. When was the last time you remembered? I mean, you could maybe put it on a par with sort of those, those cliched episodes about people being shrunk down.
Oh yeah,
and then put into shuttles and then inserted into people's bodies.
But
Anatomy Park.
I feel like the problem with this film is like, it's culturally trying to be very cutting edge in a lot of ways and quite stylish, but we've known for quite a bit now in science that like your microbiome affects your personality. And when Chip has all these things in his butt, he's kind of the same as before. Like, he's still just as detached. He's still like behaving in similar ways. And you would assume that having like multiple beings living in your butt would change your like gut flora and change you as a person.
Not true. The more things he puts in his butt, the
more powerful he gets.
His butt becomes.
Yes.
So you're right. But I think that
the stronger his butt becomes, but like, does his personality change? I don't think we see a personality change.
I think that's the main thing.
He's supposed to be like a contemporary monster.
That's the thing. So that's why I think this
movie is a horror. So don't read him as a man.
I think you can't read him as a man. He's not a man. He's a weird monster. And for me, that's the point where I both like really love the movie and think it's maybe not so great in terms of his conclusions. I think it can be read two ways. Because if his butt is a monster, and I mean, that's really cool, that's really awesome, and has that whole fantasy element to it. But if putting things up your butt makes you a monster still in 2020,
that's my problem. Like,
Well, see, on one level, I choose not to read it that way. What I choose to believe is that the thing that creates the monster is a kind of refusal of desire before he starts putting things in his butt, right? Right. Because that's the thing that creates monsters is people who
sublimation,
people who want but can't have, and then once they start having the thing, I mean, maybe there's something to be said for the fact that. I feel like going back to sort of like Freud's sort of anal retention, or sort of more broadly thinking of it as a developmental stage,
right?
In sort of psychosexual development.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Sort of, right? Is that sort of right?
Oh, it absolutely does. I mean, it fits in with lots of stuff, and like I looked up like Jung and Christine.
The idea of it coming along, because that's supposed to happen between the ages of 3 and 6 or something.
Yeah.
The idea of it happening much later, the idea of that sort of exploration not taking place earlier in someone's life, manifesting in a sort of monstrous, insatiable...
return of the repressed.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Kind of a weird use of that phrase, but...
But in a sense, yes. I mean, maybe I'm being sort of fast and loose with the sort of theory there, but...
No, I mean, it's the best way to do it.
Yeah, but like, so say you repress something and then you try to like unrepress it. That's what seems to take place in this movie, is that has disastrous effects. So it kind of makes the case for continuing to repress desires that you've already repressed.
Just push it down. Just push it down.
Because
Don't
bringing
confront
them to light like leads to like a catastrophe of events.
Is it maybe
to the people
actually
around
kind
them.
of a conservative movie? Like,
see, I read it that way for all its kind of like cheekiness and laughs that it generates. I feel like the conclusions you can draw from it are quite conservative.
Can you say more on that? Like, have you got...
Well, yeah, so like a film which I think is kind of similar in like scope and tone, just forgot my phone password there,
Nice.
everyone, is Horsegill,
Okay,
which
yeah.
was out in 2020. And it's essentially a sci-fi tragedy about mental illness with moments of both realism and luminously coloured cringe. And I think the key difference, though, is the ending, where Horsegill left me with genuine emotion because it was simultaneously a funny film exploring the post-modernity of being trapped by your individual desires and perspective, but also a tragic film. I feel like the ending of Butt Boy, on the other hand, was like gory, scatological, and entirely ridiculous, that we can't take any hints of like reality away from it other than that kind of like conservative reading. And then when Detective Fox is like reunited with his son, I can't see that as anything more than a parody of like a typical film ending either.
Right.
So it's either like ridiculous, and in that ridiculousness there's like a conservative reading there, or it's parodic of like the ending of these kind of like cat and mouse detective films.
I think that there's something to that as well about...
They're visually similar.
Right.
Is why I bring it up. But I also think that like Horsegill achieves humor, and an exploration of like taboo mental states and desires, but also like gives us this tragic figure. I don't feel like Butt Boy is tragic.
He's not. He's a monster.
Yeah.
Maybe I needed for him to be tragic. I don't know.
Yeah. Actually, it's an interesting thing that you bring up. Now that you've mentioned it, now that I'm opening the hate gates instead of, just trying to make random connections to various parts of, 1890s psychosexuality.
Citation needed.
I think maybe you're kind of onto something here. Because the first time I watched the movie, I definitely remember thinking, wow, this is a weird choice.
Horsegill or Butt Boy?
Butt Boy.
Right.
Now, I only vaguely remember Horsegill, but I do remember liking it a lot.
I vaguely remember, but similar titles. I feel like...
Horsegill, Butt Boy.
Horsegill, Butt Boy.
It's a story
like
old as old as time.
Like infantile titles, and it's like people are both trapped in this kind of like infantile state. Like Horsegill, since the death of her mother, is like kind of frozen developmentally.
Yeah.
She's not sexual. She doesn't go out. She just watches her TV shows. She lives a very like cloistered life, and then she experiences this like supernatural phenomena of like time skips and differing realities towards the middle of the film, and ultimately that turns out to be the impact of her mental illness that she's inherited from her mother. So there's like reality there, but there's also like cringe induced by her like taboo identity.
Dude, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
My question is, would you have preferred Butt Boy if it had been more of a traditional mystery? If we hadn't focused on Chip at the beginning of the movie, and then later in that montage scene, or maybe that's still the beginning of the movie. At the beginning, it's like the film is being delivered from Chip's perspective. Yeah. And I think that maybe comes from the film's inspiration being taken from a comedy sketch. Yeah. So I think that's maybe the original comedy sketch is basically played out in full at the beginning of the film. But then we switch perspective to then, to have the rest of the movie carried out from the perspective of the detective. If it had just been... This was the question I was asking myself when I watched it for the first time. If it had just been from the perspective of the detective, and if they had really tried to develop his personality, and if the Butt Boy could have been...
Well, Butt Boy's not vulnerable. That's the thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, he's so overpowered. He is a monster. Yeah. But we're also being asked to read him as a real man. And I think that tension is difficult because exactly we were invited to pity him and like identify with him because we've all lived that kind of catatonic life in like capitalism, especially now. Yeah. But the problem is it's like it gets to a point where you go, oh, I'm not like an overpowered monster. Yeah. And that identification is like well, maybe I am, but that identification is like lost, and then any kind of like reality for the film is lost, but then they try bring that back in the end, and that's weird to me. That seems like a parody then.
Right. I think what I would say is Butt Boy is a movie that has got images and themes greater than the sum of its parts.
Yes.
And especially better than its creator's intentions. I think that it is an inherently conservative movie as it exists in the can. You know what I mean? But if we
in terms of, you know, if having a sort of fairly traditional plot line.
Yeah, and having the traditional ending where the father is reunited with his
son.
Is it a son?
Yeah, I think it's a son.
That's even worse. And, you know, the character that I really hated was Butt Boy's wife.
Yeah.
Yes.
It was a really unforgiving, like, portrayal, and
it was very Judd Apatow. It was very, like...
But it's all just one note. That's the problem. Like, we're being delivered this story on the meta level of, like, this guy with, you know, his surface life and his secret life, but actually every single character was one note.
I think there are things that can be saved from the movie. Like, we need to parachute into this movie.
Like, if you just want to have a laugh at butts and enjoy something that's visually quite stunning, then that's what it is. But I think we're, like, trying to see if there's more to it. And I don't read that there's, like, a queer reading there. I don't think that we've been able to take Freud much further with it.
Oh my God, like, I'm sorry to return to it, but I really think that, like...
You worked so hard on that.
I think that it definitely is there. I think that, okay, so for me, the main thing is Chip's butt cave. Mm-hmm. Like, I think Chip being a monster, like, the idea that still, in 2020, taking pleasure from your anus inspires someone to view you as physiologically, potentially very vastly different to a normal human being is still an interesting thing, even though it's, like, incredibly problematic, it's incredibly dated, you know, and it's actually possibly kind of maybe homophobic straight up.
Sure.
I still think that there's, like, a lot of interesting, you know, ideas to be probed out of it. Like, you know, I don't know, like, what do you think of the kind of idea that, like, in child development, a lot of this anal retentiveness, and then this comes from, like, Irigaray and Gradiva, so it's sort of like Lacanian psychoanalysis of, like, reading Freud against itself, but they suggested that kids basically tried to, like, find a womb in themselves, you know, in their development stages. They were like, well, where did I come from? Well, here's, like, a place where I could have come from. Maybe I came from here, so maybe the womb is my butt. And then I thought that, like, because Butt Boy's, like, butt cave does become this very, like, womb-like place. Like, you know, babies emerge from it. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, and we also see, like, a figure in the movie, like, the man hates his wife, but in a way, maybe he's just trying to kind of become his wife, you know. Maybe it's a story about, feeling trapped in your identity and feeling trapped in your body, and then having to, you know, try to overcome that. But, you know, with the world being as conservative as it currently is, that only ends up making you into a monster. Maybe it is a tragedy. Can I talk myself into anything?
I think so, yeah. Like, you've given me some more points to think about, definitely. What do you think,
Daff? You've given me so much to think about. Like, I don't know if I hate or love this film anymore.
I'm flitting between loving and hating it.
Are we meta-modern?
I do want to try read his butt as a womb, though. Like, I think
dismay.
That's kind of cool.
Yes, butts as wombs.
But then because he's a monster, it becomes this sort of almost like a parody of this idea, right? The idea that he is storing people in there.
I feel like the way that exactly, like, he imprisons people in his butt isn't very womb-like, because those aren't people that want to be in there. Like, it's just like a typical, right? Like, hetero male colonial mission. Like, he's just taking things that aren't his and like keeping them for his own pleasure and benefit. Like,
yeah, that's the thing. But it's because he's not a.
But that's not very womb-like.
He doesn't have a womb, so he's trying to like construct this womb. Jesus, then is the film like kind of like transphobic? Then I don't know. I think that maybe
we haven't read enough to go there. Like, we haven't done our research.
That's like shaky ground. Yeah,
we're just doing our damnedest to like figure out what the butt cavern means, and I think that we're doing our best.
I love that the movie is created by comedians, though. Like, it's comedians have created this like incredibly anarchic image and are going, look, we are not in control of this. We don't know what this means. We're just doing what comedians do and creating this like.
Wouldn't it be funny if?
Yeah. And then
I think that's all the film is.
But I think that's amazing. Like, it's so cool that, like, I don't know, for me that's like one of the points of comedy is to be able to come up with things and just put them out there and see if they live or die. And like, yeah, and I don't think that gives it a defense necessarily. It doesn't mean that everything is inherently like good that comes out of that comedic space.
Yeah.
But instead that comedy is this like melting pot of ideas. And that all they need to do is just like keep coming up with wacky shit, and it's up to everyone else to kind of unpick the ideas and see if there's anything coming out of it. I
suppose like we haven't touched upon the fact that like your best friend's a doctor, Connor, and when he's worked in A&E, a bunch of people get admitted all the time with like
so many people
massive objects stuffed up their butt. So
Richard Gere.
Has that been fact checked like ever? I just decided it was true because that makes me happy.
Does it cancel it if one of us says that is categorically untrue?
I think we can say it's untrue. I think this episode has entered into the post-metamodern space,
right?
Where we can be mercurial about things and we can flip between truth and post-truth.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think even if we like Snopes, Richard Gere right now, we can live in this area of both meaning and
it's okay. I have a salt
maybe
circle
this film
me.
Isn't for me. Like, maybe this is a film for people who've had the shame of being admitted to A&E with like a Power Rangers toy in their ass. Sorry, that's literally all I could grab for. I don't know what these people are putting in their butts.
That was very specific, coming out of nowhere. Like,
that's kind of what I imagine. Like, I always imagine like a 90s toy lying around. Like, it's kind of absent-minded. I don't know why, but
a Furby. Oh, geez, a Furby's huge.
I think it's because those kind of interests, like Furbies, like people that are furries, go hand in hand with people that put like Power Rangers in their butt. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think we need to say like one more time that like we have not done enough reading. I feel like we're on a lot of like touchy ground here that we like don't know enough about.
There's chaos in the air.
That we don't judge anybody. We're respectful of everybody's like beliefs and things. Because I think I might have said some stuff earlier that is possibly like quite offensive to some people, and we don't mean any offense to anybody whatsoever.
Of course we don't mean any offense, but we're just trying to understand like
what the hell this movie
is about. And one possible guess on my part is that it's a movie for people who have had stuff stuck up their butt. And
maybe
that's okay. Like, that's maybe canon. Like, I think that's probably happened to way more people than society can admit to.
I feel like we've only really had one question, and the question is
what is it doing?
Is this movie postmodern or metamodern? And I feel like we still really don't have an answer. I initially wanted to say it's metamodern, but
I think that based on the fact that I read Horse Girl as metamodern, and there's something missing in Butt Boy that I don't find missing in Horse Girl, and they're so similar in a lot of ways, I think that Butt Boy is still stuck in postmodernity.
Can I make one final case for... I'm not going to reach for any Julia Kristeva in this. There's going to be no psychoanalysis. I just want to make one final attempt at making this metamodern. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I laughed when Chip exploded. I felt happy to be laughing. I felt like the authors sincerely intended for me to laugh. Can humor be a form of like positive emotionality that can like can they have sincerely wanted us to have a giggle?
Thinking about your monster reading, Chip as monster reading.
Yeah.
Are we laughing at the destruction of the enemy in a sense? Is that a reaction?
Can that work? Does that pass?
Is that valid as a meta?
I'm genuinely asking you, Heather. Like, you are the gatekeeper of whether or not this is meta-modern.
It does not pass. No! It shall not pass.
Well, join in next week for part 2 of our Butt Boy discussion.
No! That is not happening. I quit.
This is now the Butt Boy podcast.
Buttbox.
I need reparations for this episode alone. You can't afford me next week.
I think we're doing Horse Girl next time. It's going to be one of your
What
episodes.
has happened to the horror remit of this podcast?
Oh, no, and that's one other question, though. I think this film is 1,000%
It's absolutely a horror.
It is so horrific. There's an exploding guy that shoves things up his ass, who's clearly a Shirime, like, demon reference. There is a scene where you see air getting sucked into his butt.
I mean, Daff, it says a lot about you that you don't find it a horror. I mean, maybe you should speak to someone about that. I don't know.
Can you suck huge, entire human beings into your butt?
Absolutely not.
You're like, this is a drama. This is just a realist drama. What are you guys talking about?
It's just a dumb movie. Now that it's all
just
falling
a
apart,
dumb movie.
Now that I haven't won you over with my like literal hours of research into British sexology. Okay, it's just a dumb movie for boys.
It's a dumb movie for boys and
stinky boys.
For stinky boys who hate their girlfriends. And I'm upset by how hetero it is. And
it might be.
I think that maybe you are too, and that's why you tried to find a queer reading in it.
I tried so hard.
Bless your cotton socks, but it's not there. It's not there.
Maybe not. Maybe this is the death of my. I cannot queer read all things. Some things are just beyond my grasp.
I'm here for the ride.
So Butt Boy is monster, and he's supposed to be a funny monster.
What would we rate the movie? Okay, so what do we rate the movie if you had to give it a rating? Because like, okay, even after all of this, yeah, or 5,
what do you
it
mean?
Doesn't matter.
Right.
Yeah, so rating it out of 10, then like. If I had to rate it now, after having this conversation, I think I'm still going to give it like 6 out of 10. Like, interesting to look at, possibly dangerous ideologically, but like really novel, really worth looking. And you know, hell, if this is what these people can create on their first attempt at directing, like, who knows? Maybe
what
like,
next?
Yeah, you know.
Now that they've gotten that out of their system, so to speak.
Now they've got that. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
That was too obvious. But okay, so I would go straight 6.5 out of 10.
Yeah, I think I agree. I was looking at the IMDb rating and it's something like 5. Ooh. And I think it's maybe a touch better than that. I think the fact that we've managed to get so much from the movie.
It asks a lot of questions.
It does ask a lot of questions. And I mean, I do have some I watched a second watching, I wasn't that engaged by the plot anymore.
Oh, yeah.
I just maybe there's something about it that doesn't seem like a very well put together plot. If it's a neo-noir kind of thing, you want certain kind of consistencies, and they weren't there for me.
Right.
But I think it's yeah, roughly a 6. I think there's got to mean something if we've been talking about it for this long, and if it has, consciously or not, if it's playing with so many different shapes, then there's something there.
Heather,
I think it was stylistically cute. I like the colors. I think that the score was good. There were some issues with the pace. It was a little bit sluggish and slow moving, a la Bowl towards the middle.
Very good.
But in like honoring of how I've always judged movies, which is like the idea itself and the product that was achieved, I am going to give Butt Boy a 10 out of 10.
What?
Because I don't think they could have done any better.
Oh my god!
With the script that they had.
I think that means the average is still like 7 out of 10. So
doesn't mean I liked it, but I think they pulled off a movie about a man with a cavernous butt.
That is very
the best
big of
that
you.
anyone could have done.
That is very big of you. Oh wow.
It's just not for me, but like well done to everyone involved in Butt Boy.
Totally.
Right, well, if that's us, then we just wrap it up, I guess.
Yeah, so next week it's me again.
Yes, do you have any idea what you're going to be looking at?
Yeah, I think I'm going to look at Perfect Blue, which is an anime horror. It's actually kind of
that's cool. I've actually really
thriller.
wanted to get into anime horror, and I can't. I don't know. It's just not something I've been able to like easily find.
You know, weirdly, it's kind of a strange genre because like a lot of anime horror kind of goes like too far, and it's more just kind of about shock or like, you know, what do you call it, spectacle type of thing, and then a lot of it like. There's a lot of like really gross themes when you get into like deep anime horror.
Sure.
So, but there are a lot of like anime thrillers. So, I'm going to be looking at Perfect Blue by the director whose name I cannot remember right now, but I do know that they have sadly passed away. So, it's a really interesting movie in that regard. Like, this is a very visionary director who unfortunately has now passed away and stuff. So, we'll be looking at that.
What year is it from?
It's from a year.
Oh, cool. Good. I'm glad. Yeah.
It was made in a year.
It was made in a year?
Yeah, the 90s.
So it's not like coming out, it's already been made.
It's very like well established. Yeah.
No, I was being sarcastic.
Oh, I'm such an idiot.
I've already seen Perfect Blue. I really liked it. I want to talk about it.
That's great. I'm excited. I'm really
great.
excited. Great. Well, if that's us, then we should just wrap it up. Thanks very much for listening to SpookBox, and we sure as hell hope that you join us next time.
We also should probably do a health warning, not to insert anything too big in your butt.
Or do.
But just be careful, guys.
If you could do us the biggest favor of trying to like and subscribe to our channel, that would be fantastic. I don't even know if you can do the bell icon with our show yet, but
is that like a tier that you have to unlock?
I think you might to get the bell icon, but you know, anything you can do to help the channel and keep it going and keep people watching would be absolutely fantastic.
I don't care about that. Don't feel like you have to do that.
Okay, cool. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.